natural law theory. We are transitioning from metaethics to normative theory or ethical theory. And to appreciate what that project is, I encourage students to think about themselves at the end of a sort of conveyor belt of possible actions. And these actions are coming down the line, and it's your job to consider the action and put it in a box of impermissible actions, or put it in a bin of permissible actions. Okay, so let's say this is torturing babies for fun. So you think about, okay, well, torturing babies for fun seems bad, so we will put it in the impermissible bin. Then we look at this possible action. This possible action is helping old ladies across the street. And that, okay, well, that seems permissible, at least in most cases, so you put that in that bin. And these could be more general or more specific. It could be abortion, or it could be abortion in the case of rape, or it could be abortion in the case of consensual sex. It could be trans women in sports. It could be whatever, and you figure out whether you think it goes in the permissible bin or the impermissible bin. And after a while, after you get lots and lots of different actions in your bins, you are going to be curious enough to ask, well, what rule am I using? It may not be apparent to you at all. It almost certainly isn't. But what rule am I using to decide which actions are going into the impermissible bin and as opposed to the permissible bin? And if you're at all philosophical, you're going to look at your pile of impermissible actions and permissible actions, and you're going to wonder whether or not you're using the right rule. You may look over at my conveyor belt and see I have a different set of impermissible actions and permissible actions. And you may want to debate about whose is best. You might wonder whose is best and want to engage in some ethics of figuring out whose principle is best. Maybe yours is wrong a little bit and mine is wrong a little bit, right? And so that's the project of normative ethics. So we want to figure out what makes morally good acts good and what makes those morally bad acts bad, okay? And we may not come up with like the grand unifying theory of that, but at least we could come up to some better understanding of what reasons are the reasons that we should consider when deciding whether an action is bad or not. So as Russ Schaefer Landau, the author of your text, puts it, actions are right just when and because they are natural, and wrong just when and because they are unnatural. People are good or bad to the extent that they fulfill their true nature. The more they do, the better they are. And it's not a crazy view. We definitely think that it's one way to praise something to call it natural. So if we, let's see, natural food advertisement. So we see Cheetos is trying to say that it's natural. 7-Up, right? Is Cheetos natural? Probably not, but it helps them sell Cheetos. And they sell a lot more Cheetos by arguing that they're natural than by saying that they're unnatural, right? So it's it isn't insane to think that what makes something good is that it's natural, all right? And maybe that applies to morality too. Now, an early advocate of natural law theory was the great philosopher Aristotle, one of the first and greatest biologists. And he approached morality in a sort of biological way, with a very biological framework. Consider the fact that if you were given the choice, you would probably choose to be a wild animal out in nature than a wild animal in a zoo, So if you were forced to choose between the life of an eagle in an aviary with your wings clipped, or the life of a free wild eagle out in Alaska, you would almost certainly choose the life of the free wild eagle in Alaska. And even if I sweeten the deal by telling you, but you know, in the zoo, you're going to get food that's, you know, delivered very reliably. You'll never go hungry. When you get sick, you'll be taken care of by the zoo's vet, right? If I tell you all that stuff, you'd be like, yeah, the comforts are nice and all that, but I'd rather live like an eagle is supposed to live, you might say, right? I want to dive into the water and grab the fish out of the lake and make my eagle nest and have my eagle babies and, you know, soar above the clouds and just do all this eagle stuff. Okay, so we do seem to think that it is better to, even if there's more suffering, to be wild and live the life that you were meant to live as an animal. Okay, and much the same reasoning applies to domestic animals who seem to be living their best life when they do what they were made to do, or when they fulfill their nature. For instance, my mother-in-law had a black lab, and these are dogs that are sort of designed to retrieve animals that you hunt. And this dog loved playing fetch so much that if I kept throwing the tennis ball, she would pass out or throw up or something like that. So I had to be judicious and only do it for a few minutes before she just, you know, had a heart attack or whatever. But the look on her face and the anticipation when she knew that I was about to play fetch with her is something I'll never forget. That dog was happier playing fetch than anything I could imagine, okay? And that's because that dog is fulfilling her nature. So why not apply the same reasoning to us? Why not say that the good life for us is the life that suits our nature? And why not say furthermore that the right way to act, the morally right way to act, is the way that leads to the best life for us? So according to natural law theory, we need to discover our nature and then live according to our nature in order to live morally correctly. All right, but that raises this interesting question. What is our nature? How do we discover what our nature is? So in what remains of this lecture, we're going to look at 4 models of the natural: the normalcy, the theological, the fitness, and the efficiency model. So these are 4 different sort of mini philosophies about what is natural, what your nature is, what it means to fulfill your purposes or natural purposes, something like that, okay? Now, I don't want you to lose sight of what we're doing here, right? What we're going to be doing right now is arguing about what your nature is, what your function is, okay? And that's important because we need to plug that into our natural law theory to have any sort of determinate action guiding natural law theory, right? So let's look at that for a bit. Okay, so the first model of what is natural is the normalcy model, which just holds that the natural is the normal. The natural is whatever is sort of statistically average for what you are. And it does seem like we do care about being normal. It does seem like we use normalcy as a sort of guide to health and to moral goodness. So for instance, let's just search for, is it normal? Is it normal? Maybe you could see what I'm doing here. Is it normal to discharge every day, to miss a period, to talk to yourself, to not dream? Is it normal to cry every day? Is it normal to breathe heavy? Okay, so people are using normalcy as a guide for health. Let's go from health. Is it normal to, let's look at more psychological health. Is it normal to want to cry, to retire, to want a relationship, to be sad, to run away, to feel sad, to be alone? All right, so to want to feel pain. So these are people wanting to know if they're wanting to figure out if their desires are good or bad or not to some degree. But the way they frame it is by inquiring whether or not it's normal. How about this? Is it normal to hate God? Is it normal to hate men? Is it normal to hate cats, dogs, kids, life, work, babies? Okay, so there are a lot of people out there who are, how about this? Is it normal to want to kill? Oh, DuckDuckGo's not going to put that in. Is it normal to want to hurt cute things? So there, people use normalcy as a guide to health, mental health, and morality. So you could see why people might say that, well, to do what you're supposed to do is to be living naturally, and the natural life is just being a normal person. Just be normal. Okay, but I think in our reflective moments we can see this isn't a great theory of morality, even if it is a good theory of our nature, which it may not be that either. So for instance, it is not normal to have 11 fingers. But does it seem to you morally bad to have 11 fingers? I mean, I know that back in grade school, we did, make fun of and get made fun of for anything that was, anything that was different. But I think we get now that just mere atypicality does not mean that you're bad, that at least morally bad. In fact, sometimes being atypical is really great. Like Olympic athletes are atypical. They're atypically athletic and graceful and disciplined. But, none of us think that marks them out for, moral condemnation, that they're morally bad because of that. Gorgeous people are by definition, atypically good looking. Having an IQ of over 140 is extremely atypical, but none of us think it's like a bad thing or a morally bad thing to be that way. So using just what is normal, plugging that as a substitute for what is natural, and then saying live naturally, makes for a very weird moral theory indeed. It has some counterintuitive consequences. So don't forget that process of reflective equilibrium, in which we evaluate the plausibility of moral theories on the basis of thought experiments and or cases. And so when we consider the case of an Olympic athlete, just seems like, yep, are they very abnormal? Yep. Does it seem to you that they're morally bad? Nope. So that speaks against the view that to be abnormal is to be morally bad. Let's go to a second, more sophisticated theory of what our nature is and what our purposes are. And that is what we'll call the theological model, which holds that our nature is God's design for us. More generally, anything's nature is what X was designed by some creator or designer to do. So on this view, a fillet knife has as its purpose the filleting of fish because it was made by its designer to fillet fish. And on this view, that's what you should use it for, to fillet fish. And many religious people think that our natures were designed by God, like, say, in a literal interpretation of Genesis, and that our purposes are whatever God had as our purposes. And there seems to be debate among people who feel like God created us, about what our real function is. You will hear many say that it is to glorify God. Some will say that it is to love our neighbors and love each other and love God. So you could inquire of them and figure out what purposes they have. We'll try to stay kind of general on the question. There are objections that apply to it, no matter what purpose they offer us, because of course we need to take seriously the possibility that we were not designed by God. Maybe God doesn't exist, right? Maybe we don't live in a created universe. Maybe God does exist, but he didn't design us, right? So maybe he just created the universe or something like that. Or maybe he didn't even create the universe, he just exists, and universes pop into being or have always been popping into being. And he just, is unconcerned with it or whatever. But maybe not, I don't know. I'm not trying to make you an atheist by any stretch of the imagination, but these are, if it's very improbable to you that God exists or designed us, and yet it is very probable to you that there's right and wrong to do, then you're going to have a problem with this theological model as it's inserted into natural law theory. A second and more interesting objection, I think, strikes deeper at the heart of these some of these natural law theories, because it wants to know why we are morally required to live according to God's purposes for us, even if God did create us with purposes in mind. Okay, so it doesn't seem, to the critic at least, generally true that just because somebody creates X, just somebody creates something with the purpose in mind, that it is wrong for X to be used in some way deviating from that purpose. So here's a little thought experiment. Suppose that you design a tool to do A, like say you design a tongue depressor to depress tongues. And you're very happy with yourself, and you have your tongue depressor factory, and you see all the trucks leaving with all the tongue depressors. And you turn on the TV later in the day and you find that some UMM art student has made a big model boat out of tongue depressors. Would you be upset about this? Would you think that that student did something wrong by making a tongue depressor ship with your tongue depressors? Probably not. You'd probably say, well, that's creative, or darn, don't they work well for making model ships? What will people come up with next? All right. Now, if you don't see anything wrong with people using your tongue depressors in ways that you didn't design your tongue depressors to be used, why, right? The question is raised about why should God be upset? What grounds would God have to be upset with our living lives that are contrary to the purposes that he had in mind when he created us, supposing that all that happened? So we mustn't make the naturalistic fallacy. The naturalistic fallacy is when you derive an ought statement, a moral statement, from an is statement or non-moral statements. So this premise is a non-moral premise. It is not saying anything about morality. It is what philosophers call a descriptive statement. It just says God designed us to do P. Okay. But this conclusion is saying something about what we should do, and that just logically, just as a matter of pure logic, won't follow from a mere statement of what is the case. All right. So we could make this into a logically valid argument. It would look like this: God designed us to do P. If God designed us to do P, then we ought to do P and refrain from doing not P. So we should do P and refrain from doing non-P. Now that is a valid argument, all right? But now you need to argue for this. If God designed us to do P, we should do P and refrain from doing not P. But, but why, right? You need to explain that. Consider, I designed tongue depressors to depress tongues. If Dan designs tongue depressors to depress tongues, then we ought to use tongue depressors to depress tongues and refrain from using tongue depressors to make model ships and whatever else. So we should use tongue depressors to depress tongues and refrain from using tongue depressors to make model ships. Okay. Well, obviously, there's no doubt that, we're just in our little imaginary case that we designed tongue depressors to depress tongues, but this is awfully wild. Like, why the tongue depressor version of 2, like just because Dan designed tongue depressors to depress tongues, why ought we use them to depress tongues and not use them in other ways as well? Okay. Now, for that, we need a sub-argument. We could maybe design one. Here would be a sub-argument. We ought to do what makes us happy, and happiness is fulfilling your nature. That doesn't sound that crazy, this premise. Fulfilling our nature is doing what God designed us to do and refraining from what God did not design us to do. And God designed us to do P, so therefore we should do P and refrain from doing not P, whatever that may be. All right, so that would be a sub-argument for 2. But, there's some questions about this argument. Is it true that we ought to do what makes us happy? Is it true that we have a moral obligation to do what makes us happy? Is it true? It's kind of plausible, but is it true that happiness is fulfilling your nature? Is it true that doing what God designed us to do is fulfilling our nature? So, or that God designed us to do these things. All each of these is questionable. That doesn't mean it's wrong. But even if one of these premises is false, that doesn't mean that this is false. That just means this argument would be unsound. But it may be the conclusion of a sound argument that we just haven't thought of. All right. Now let's look at a third theory of what's natural and what our purposes are, that gets rid of God and sort of replaces Mother Nature with God. So on this view, what you evolve to do is what your purposes are. Okay. So we definitely evolved to do certain things. We do have a nature. If evolution is true, we have a nature. If evolution is not true, we have a nature. So part of our nature is, without a doubt, being social, being sexual. We're a sexually reproducing species. We're not an asexually reproducing species. We don't bud little babies off of our back and they just drop off or something like that. We are clearly omnivorous. We are diurnal, so we are a species that's awake during the day and we sleep at night, and we're not nocturnal. Okay, we care for our children, unlike sea turtles that just lay eggs and then go, because the babies have all they need via instinct to survive and so forth. So we definitely have a nature. There's no doubt about that. Now, it could be a nature that God gave us because he fashioned us, or it could be a nature that we get from evolution. All right. But on this view, our function is going to be understood in terms of our biological purpose, which is to pass on our genes. So on this view, the function of a thing is whatever of a living thing, at least, is whatever enhances its fitness or success in survival and reproduction. So on this view of what our nature is, inserted into natural law theory, behaviors that increase your fitness are morally good, and behaviors that frustrate your fitness or are maladaptive or something like that are morally wrong. And I think you see where this is going. Their counter examples seem to abound. Sometimes it is going to be, it's going to redound to your fitness. It's going to be quite adaptive to steal, to cheat, to kill, to lie, even to rape, right? Sometimes rape is a smart reproductive strategy. But does it seem to you that rape is ever a moral reproductive strategy? Probably not, right? So you think that some things that are adaptive in some instances are nonetheless immoral. And likewise, you think that some maladaptive things are moral. So you probably think it's okay to be celibate. Maybe celibacy isn't right for you, but if you watched on TV someone who decided to take religious orders and join a convent or a monastery, or become a priest, like a Catholic priest, and took vows of celibacy, you wouldn't think that they were doing anything wrong, morally wrong, in just deciding to be celibate. Okay. I have here also living out in nature. So suppose somebody has sort of just as a real loner and they just want to have a cabin out in the woods. Well, that's not very good for passing on your genes, right? If you're alone, you're not gonna see a lot of potential mates, and that's not good. So, but none of us would say, oh, this guy who moved to the backwoods of Alaska is doing something morally wrong, because how is he going to pass on his genes? So again, we have the fallacy: we evolved to do P, so therefore we should do P. Well, why, right? We need a moral premise in there that if we evolved to do P, we should do P and refrain from doing P. That makes it valid, but we still don't know why we should do this. And again, the explanation may have to do with happiness. That we won't be happy unless we do what we evolved to do. I don't know whether that's true. And I don't know whether or not it's morally obligatory at all to be happy. So, that would all need to be argued for. The final account of what is natural and what our function is very Aristotelian in nature, and I'm going to call it the efficiency model. So Aristotle held the view that the function of a thing is whatever it does better than anything else, or more precisely, the function of a thing is whatever it does uniquely and best. So for instance, it does seem that when you look at the many things that a cheetah could be used for, I guess you could always use a cheetah as a paperweight. And I guess you could use, maybe you could train a cheetah to pull a dog cart or something like that. I don't know. But he wouldn't be very good as a paperweight. I mean, actual paperweights perform better than cheetahs. They tend to be restless, and paperweights tend not to bite your face off. And, you know, a dog cart is probably pulled better by a dog. And cheetahs, you know, aren't really good at doing that, or not nearly as good as other things that could do that work. Okay. But one thing that the cheetah could do better than everything else, and, you know, uniquely better than anything else, is hunt down fast prey on the savannah. And so Aristotle would say, you know, that is the cheetah's function. Now, you know, notice here that we're not appealing to normalcy. So he's not saying the function of a cheetah is what the normal cheetah does, because most cheetahs may be in zoos, but that still wouldn't be their function to be in zoos. And he's not saying that the cheetah should do what someone designed the cheetah to do. In fact, Aristotle didn't think anyone designed cheetahs to do anything. He didn't think that we were the product of intelligent design, nor did he think we were the product of evolution. He just sort of thought that the world had always been this way. So he thinks that you can tell what a cheetah has as its function by understanding what the cheetah is like and seeing that this is what it does uniquely and best. All right. And it does accord perhaps with our earlier thoughts about what the good life for a cheetah would be. All right, so far so good. There are some objections, though, to this efficiency model. Suppose that all the fast creatures died out like cheetahs and horses, but we still had like rhinoceri. Well, let's say the rhinoceros was the fastest creature that was left. Would the rhinoceros now have the function of running fast because it was sort of uniquely good at that? That seems implausible. Now, what does this view say about humans? You could see why. You could see how this would apply to humans, because you would just ask, well, what do humans do uniquely and best? And Aristotle would say, clearly they're not particularly good at climbing. I mean, we're okay at climbing, but monkeys climb better. We're okay at digging with our hands, at least in the sand, but, you know, plenty of animals dig better. You know, a badger digs better, is a better digger. We can't fly. We could swim a little bit, but we're not like, you know, a tuna. So what is it that we do uniquely and best? And the answer is clearly thinking. You know, so applying this same principle that you apply to trying to figure out what other animals' function is, Aristotle concludes that our function is thinking, reasoning, doing head stuff, being creative. And thus that is the function of humans, and that is the good life for humans. And the best humans are the humans who do this well. So just like you would say a sort of morbidly obese, cankly cheetah is not a very good cheetah because it can't fulfill its function well out on the savannah, Aristotle would say a sort of dumb person who can't think well, who doesn't have what it takes to really live a life of the mind very much, is just not a good person. Now, does that seem right to you? And it probably does not. Okay. You probably think, obviously, I mean, sure, would it be nice to be smart? Yeah. Would it be nice to be more creative? Yeah. But you're not morally deficient in any way if you're not those things. But Aristotle thought that, well, he might agree. He might actually agree with you, because the sense of goodness and badness that he was thinking of just is really different than the sense of goodness and badness, moral goodness and badness that you and I are thinking of. The sense of moral goodness and badness that you and I are thinking of is on this side of Christianity, which did a lot to promote the idea that we are all moral equals. It is on this side of Immanuel Kant, whose conception of morality has profoundly shaped the early lectures of this class where I talk about the moral concept. But that wasn't the conception of goodness and badness and rightness and wrongness that Aristotle had, that the classical Greek world had, or the classical Roman world had, or probably anywhere around the world had, which was much more aristocratic, viewed people in very much the same way that we view animals, and, or I should say, horses in a horse race. The best horses are the fastest horses. There's better and worse horses. And there are better and worse people. And there are better and worse as a function of excellence of some sort. And for Aristotle, that excellence was an excellence of the life of the mind. Aristotle was in some ways breaking with the normal thought, which was that, yeah, obviously some people are better or worse. And in the case of men, what made them better was being rich and powerful and deadly on the battlefield, and good looking, things like that. And for a woman, being good looking, having lots of babies, being sexually restrained, things like that, that makes a woman better or worse. And the more she had those things, the better a specimen she was. That's probably not how you think about what makes somebody better or worse. So your concept of morality is less hierarchical, less aristocratic, more egalitarian. It doesn't seem weird to you to imagine a world where everybody is equally morally good. But for Aristotle, that would be absurd. The idea that everyone would be good relative to who? You could only be good if you were like better than some other people. That's what would make you good. All right. So there's some differences there. Okay, we looked at a few different theories of the natural. The normalcy model, a very simple one, saying that what is typical is natural. The theological model, which adds this element of function and proper purpose, okay? This idea of teleology, coming from the Greek word telos, for function, all right? A good word to know, telos, or teleological, important to impress your parents with that so that they keep sending you to school, believe that you're learning something. There's a teleological element in the theological model. It says that you have this function or this purpose, and this purpose is God's purpose for you, given that he's your creator. The third theory says that your purpose is what nature has given you, okay? What your natural functions are. So that's teleological as well. And Aristotle's is certainly teleological, but he feels that your nature is based upon what you do, what we do uniquely and best.